Have you ever experienced the moment when you decide to take a step of faith and place God first in your life, only to see everything begin to fall apart, as though instead of finding peace, you're caught in a whirlwind of challenges and trials? Let me tell you something, that's no coincidence, it's a sign, because when you place God at the center, things start to shift, and not always in the way you expect. It is then that you must remember that the greatest blessings often come wrapped in the toughest trials. So don't be frightened, because what seems like chaos is actually God orchestrating something extraordinary in your life. Get ready, because what is about to happen will be far greater than you can imagine. Before we begin, I want you to write this phrase in the comments. I put God first and trust His plan without fear. Declare it with faith and make it yours today. Let's begin with verse 1. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Matthew 6:33 is a profound declaration that shifts our view of life. In these words, Jesus offers us a promise, and at the same time, a challenge. He calls us to make God our top priority, assuring us that when we do, all our needs will be met. It serves as a reminder that our priorities are not a trivial matter, but the foundation upon which we build a full and meaningful life. Jesus says, seek first, stressing that our attention, energy, and focus must align with the principles of God's kingdom. In a world that constantly urges us to worry about material things, financial stability, or achieving personal goals, these words encourage us to reorder our hearts. It's not about disregarding our earthly needs, but about trusting that by prioritizing God, those needs will be fulfilled in due time and in the proper way. The kingdom of God isn't an abstract idea. It's living according to values of love, compassion, integrity, and justice. When we prioritize these principles, our choices reflect a divine perspective that frees us from anxiety and fear of lack. Jesus doesn't promise that everything will be simple, but He does guarantee that we will have everything we need. By seeking His kingdom first, we learn to rely less on our own strength and more on His perfect provision. The phrase, all these things will be added to you, doesn't mean we'll receive everything we want, but that God will provide for our essential needs. We often confuse our priorities with our desires, but in seeking God's kingdom, our minds and desires are transformed. This verse calls us to evaluate our faith and consider where we place our trust, whether in our own abilities or in God's loving care. When we seek His kingdom, we undergo a profound transformation. We cease living under constant stress and begin walking in a peace that transcends circumstances. Facing challenges, whether at work, at home, or in school, from a place of service and gratitude, allows us to see how every part of our lives can reflect our commitment to God. As this passage demonstrates, faith is not passive. It requires action. It's a daily choice to put God above our worries and to live confidently in the belief that He is in control. When we prioritize God, our lives take on deeper meaning, and our relationships with others are enriched because we act from a heart full of love and compassion. This teaching invites us to hope. It reminds us that God is not distant from our struggles or indifferent to our concerns. He is a faithful provider who meets our needs even before we ask. Yet, to experience this provision, we must take that step of faith to seek His kingdom and righteousness. In this act of trust, we find freedom because we stop trying to control everything and learn to rest in His sovereignty. Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. These words are more than just a promise. They are an invitation to live with purpose, fulfillment, and trust in God's plan. Ask yourself today, how can you seek the kingdom of God first? Which areas of your life need to align with this teaching? This is the time to act in faith, to place God at the center, and to experience the transformation that only He can bring. Verse 2. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge Him in all your ways, and He will make your paths straight. Proverbs 3:5-6 offers us a clear and direct guide for navigating life with wisdom and peace. How many times have we felt lost, unsure of which way to go? This passage reminds us that the key is not relying on our logic or understanding, but trusting fully in the Lord, allowing Him to guide each step. Trusting the Lord with all our heart is not easy. It means surrendering control, something we often find unsettling. We are accustomed to planning, analyzing, and depending on our problem-solving abilities. However, this complete trust requires us to recognize that our vision is limited, and no matter how wise we think we are, we don't always see the whole picture. It's like trying to navigate a dark sea, relying only on our hands to find the way, without a beacon that can light the path. The verse warns us not to lean on our own understanding. This doesn't mean we shouldn't think or use our intellect, but that we shouldn't base our decisions solely on human perception. Often, what seems logical to us may be wrong or incomplete. God, on the other hand, has an infinite perspective. He sees not only the present but the future and all the unseen variables. When we trust Him, we make choices aligned with a greater purpose, one beyond our imagination. Acknowledging the Lord in all our ways is an intentional action. It's not just about seeking Him in times of crisis or thanking Him when things go well, but about including Him in every part of our daily lives, from small decisions to the major steps that shape our future. We must recognize that He is present, ready to guide us. This recognition strengthens our relationship with God and provides clarity and direction. It enables us to live confidently, knowing we're not alone on the journey. The promise in this passage is powerful. He will make your paths straight. Think about what this means. No matter how complex, twisted, or confusing things may seem, God can straighten them. He can transform what feels lost into something filled with purpose and direction. But for this to happen, we must take the first step of faith. Trusting in God is not passive. It requires action. It's about seeking His guidance and being willing to follow it, even when we don't fully understand why. This verse encourages us to stop fighting our circumstances with our own strength and to rest in God's sovereignty. Instead of worrying about what's beyond our control, we can learn to live with profound peace, knowing He is in control. Trusting God doesn't eliminate challenges, but alters the way we face them. It assures us that, even if we don't know what's ahead, we know who is guiding our steps. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. These words challenge us to live differently, not to depend solely on what we see or understand, but to trust the God who sees beyond today. Reflect on the areas in your life where you're trying to control everything. Where do you need to let go and allow God to take charge? Now is the time to make that choice, to surrender your heart, and to experience the peace and direction that only He can offer. When we acknowledge God in all our ways, our lives change. We stop walking in circles and start moving forward with purpose. Trusting Him isn't just a suggestion, it's the key to a life full of meaning, direction, and hope. So today, dare to trust, to let go, and to allow Him to make your paths straight. There is no wiser or safer choice than the one God has prepared for you. Verse 3. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God who strengthens you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Isaiah 41:10 isn't merely a message, it's a promise, a refuge for every moment of uncertainty and fear. How often have we felt overwhelmed, unable to carry the weight of our troubles? These words remind us that we're never alone, that God walks with us, ready to strengthen us and lift us up. When we think we can't go on any longer, don't fear, because He is with us. These are words that reach deep into the heart. Fear is one of the most prevalent and paralyzing emotions we face. We fear the future, failure, loss. Yet here, God assures us that His presence is always with us. What can offer more security than knowing that the Creator of the universe walks beside us? No matter how fierce the storm, no matter how dark the path may seem, He is there, supporting us, guiding us, and assuring us that there is no reason to fear. Do not be disheartened, for I am your God who strengthens you. This part of the verse is a reminder that our strength doesn't come solely from within. There are times when our energy is drained, when we feel as though we've given everything we have, yet still cannot move forward. It is in those moments that God says, I am your strength. He is the one who renews our power. When we feel we can't go on, it's as if He recharges us, giving us the energy and resolve needed to continue. Even in the most challenging circumstances, I will always help you. The word always is crucial here. God doesn't say He will be with us only when things are easy or when we behave in a certain way. His help is unconditional. He is constant in every trial, in every moment of weakness. He is there, extending His hand to lift us up. This means that no matter how many times we fall or how intense our struggle may be, His promise of help remains unbroken. His faithfulness is our guarantee. I will always uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness. Here, we encounter a powerful image. God holding us with His right hand. His hand not only lifts us, but also provides stability and direction. It is His justice that leads us, His truth that keeps us steady when everything around us seems to falter. When we feel weak, insecure, or overwhelmed, His right hand reminds us that we are not fighting alone. He is holding our every step, ensuring we do not fall. This verse is not only a foundation, it is an invitation to live by faith. It challenges us to release our fear and trust fully in the God who never abandons us. What does this mean in practice? It means stopping to focus not on our circumstances, but on the one who is above them. It means praying, trusting, and walking with the certainty that no matter what occurs, God is in control. In those moments when life brings us to our knees, when we feel on the brink of collapse, this verse reminds us that we don't have to face anything alone. There is a divine force that supports us, a presence that accompanies us, a promise that never fails. God is not only with us, but He is actively helping us, guiding us, strengthening us. He invites us to rest in His power, to trust in His plan, and to walk with the confidence that no matter what we encounter, His right hand of justice will always be there to uphold us. So today, take these words and make them your own. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not faint, for I am your God who strengthens you. Repeat them whenever fear arises, whenever discouragement knocks at your door. Let these promises be a shield for your heart and a constant reminder that with God at your side, there is no battle you cannot face, no challenge you cannot conquer. He is with you now and forever, sustaining you with His unwavering love and limitless strength. Verse 4, the Lord will fight for you, and you will be still. These words, taken from Exodus 14:14, serve as a powerful reminder of who truly controls our lives. Think for a moment. How many times do we find ourselves battling situations that seem impossible? We exhaust ourselves trying to fix problems, facing battles with our own strength, feeling drained and sometimes defeated. Yet here, God offers us an incredible promise. We don't have to fight. He is fighting for us. Imagine the scene when these words were spoken. The people of Israel were trapped with the Red Sea before them and the Egyptian army closing in behind. Despair and fear must have been overwhelming, but in the midst of that distress, God, through Moses, gives them this promise. The Lord will fight for you. There was nothing they could do to escape that situation, but God already had a plan, and it didn't rely on their strength, skill, or intelligence. It depended solely on his power. These words hold the same power today. We face different kinds of armies in our lives: financial struggles, illness, family issues, internal doubts. Each of us has a battle that seems insurmountable. However, God calls us to trust him, to stop fighting with our own strength, and to remain calm. This doesn't mean we should be passive or resigned, but that we should surrender our worries to him and trust that he is working on our behalf. "You will be still" is not a call for us to cross our arms. It's an invitation to faith. In calmness, there is quiet trust, a declaration that even though we can't see the solution, we know that God is in control. It's like saying, "I don't know how I will get through this, but I trust that God already has a way." This peace of mind comes not from our circumstances, but from the assurance that we have a God who fights our battles, a God who never loses. We often fight because we crave control, wanting to solve everything on our terms, in our timing. But this promise challenges us. Let go of that control. Surrender our battles to the one who can move mountains, part seas, and defeat armies. When we let God fight for us, we not only experience his power, but also his peace. We stop feeling the burden of the battle because we know it is not ours to carry. This verse also teaches us something vital about the connection between our faith and God's works. God fights for us, but he asks us to trust. It is an active faith, one that invites us to stand firm in the storm, not to panic or make rash decisions. He asks us to trust his plan even when we don't fully understand it, because his perspective is infinite and perfect. The Lord will fight for you. How amazing is it to know that we are not alone in our struggles. He is fighting for us not as a distant observer, but as an active advocate in our greatest challenges. He is present, working behind the scenes, doing what we cannot do. There is no battle too great, no situation too complex for him. All he asks of us is to trust and allow him to work. Today, take this verse and apply it to your life. Reflect on the battles you are facing. What would happen if you let God take control? What would happen if you trusted that he is fighting for you even when you can't see him? His promise is certain. He is with you. He fights for you. And all he asks of you is to trust and find peace in his presence. No matter what you face, remember this: you are not alone in the battle. The God who parted the Red Sea is with you, fighting your battles and ensuring that in the end you will be victorious. Verse 5, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted on the earth." This verse from Psalm 46 is a direct invitation to stop, to cease striving, and simply recognize who God is. But what does it really mean to be still in a world that demands constant action from us, where we are measured by what we do and accomplish? These words seem to go against everything we've been taught. However, in them lies one of the deepest keys to our relationship with God: learning to stop and acknowledge his sovereignty. Being still isn't just a physical pause, it's an inner state. It's about ceasing to depend on our own strategies, our limited understanding, and fully trusting that God is in control. Many times, in the midst of chaos, we try to solve everything on our own, seeking quick fixes, fighting against what we don't understand. But here God says, stop fighting, I am God. It is a call to rest in his presence, to give our worries to him, and to trust that he is working even when we can't see it. Know that I am God. These words remind us that the purpose of being still is not just to rest, but to have a profound revelation of who God is. In stillness, we learn to hear his voice, to see his hand at work in our lives. It is in that stillness that we experience peace, the peace that surpasses all understanding, because we recognize that he is greater than any problem, mightier than any storm. God doesn't just want us to follow him. He wants us to know him, to understand that his love, his power, and his purpose are above everything we face. This verse also leads us to examine our tendency to elevate our own abilities, our ideas, and our solutions. Too often, we live as if everything depends on us, as though we can control every detail. But here, God reminds us that he is the one who will be exalted among the nations, who will be exalted on the earth. It is not we who carry the burden of the world, it is him. Our task is not to solve everything, but to surrender to the only one who has the power to do so. I will be exalted among the nations, exalted, I will be on earth. These words are a declaration of the absolute sovereignty of God. He shows us that in the end, his name will be glorified, no matter how disordered or uncertain the world may seem. This promise gives us hope because it assures us that God is in total control, that his plan will not fail, and that his purpose will be fulfilled. Even if at times it seems that circumstances are out of control, God invites us to remember that he is on the throne, ruling with righteousness and power. Be still and know God. Our lives change. We stop living driven by anxiety and begin to walk with confidence. Instead of worrying about what we cannot control, we rest in his presence. And in that rest we find strength, clarity, and purpose. We realize that we are not alone, that we do not carry the burdens on our own, because the God of the universe is with us, working on our behalf. Think about your own life. How many times have you tried to solve everything by yourself, only to end up exhausted, frustrated, and lost? God invites you to let go of that weight, to stop fighting, and to trust him. When you stop and recognize that he is God, you discover a peace that nothing in this world can offer. No matter what you are facing today, God tells you, be still and know me. Let me be God in your life. Let me show you my power and my love. This verse is more than a call to tranquility. It is an invitation to live with purpose and faith. As we acknowledge God in our stillness, we align with his eternal plan, a plan that transcends our circumstances and always aims for his glory. So today, pause, stop in the midst of the noise of worries, of struggles. Listen to his voice, trust in his promise, and let him be exalted in your life. Because when God is exalted, everything else finds its place. Verse 6, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. These words from Philippians 4:6-7 are a direct invitation to abandon anxiety and embrace a peace that the world cannot offer. But how to live them in a world where worry seems inevitable? This message calls us to respond in a completely different way, to face our concerns not with anguish, but with faith. Do not worry about anything seems almost impossible. True, we live surrounded by uncertainties, economic problems, family concerns, work challenges. But here, Paul is not telling us to ignore our realities, but to face them with a divine perspective. Instead of letting worries govern our minds, we are invited to trust in God. It is not about denying difficulties, but about not allowing ourselves to be consumed by them, because we know that we are not alone. God is with us, willing to listen and act in our lives. On all occasions, with prayer and petition, present your requests to God. This is the heart of this verse. Every time worry knocks on our door, the answer is not to lock ourselves in our mind or try to solve everything with our own strength. The answer is prayer. To talk to God, to pour out our hearts to him, to present our needs, our fears, and our struggles. But here's something else. It's not just about asking, it's about doing so with thanksgiving. Thanking God even before we see the answer is an act of faith that changes our perspective. It's recognizing that he's in control and that his plan is perfect, even when we don't understand the details. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. This is the most powerful promise of this passage. It is not about any peace. It is not the temporary calm that we may find in fleeting solutions. It is the peace of God, a supernatural peace that does not depend on our circumstances. It is a peace that makes no sense from a human point of view because it remains even in the midst of the greatest storms. This peace protects our hearts, shielding them from fear, and our minds, keeping them from despair. The key here is that this peace comes as a result of trusting God. When we bring our burdens to Him in prayer, when we choose to thank Him instead of worrying, something extraordinary happens. Our minds and hearts are transformed. It doesn't mean that our problems disappear immediately, but it does mean that we don't face those problems with the weight of anxiety, but with the assurance that God is working on our behalf. Think about how liberating this is. Every time anxiety tries to take over, you can stop, pray, and trust that God is listening. No matter how big the problem, He's bigger. No matter how complicated the situation, He has the power to solve it. This verse doesn't promise a life without difficulties, but it does promise a peace that will sustain you through them, a peace that comes directly from Christ Jesus. Gratitude also plays a fundamental role here. Giving thanks to God in the midst of difficulties is not natural, but it is transformative. It changes our focus from what we lack to what we have already received. It reminds us that God has been faithful in the past and that He will continue to be faithful in the future. When we are thankful, our faith is strengthened and our perspective changes. Today, take this invitation and make it part of your life. When worry tries to steal your peace, stop. Pray. Present to God everything that troubles you. Thank Him for what He has already done, and trust in what is to come. Remember that His peace is available to you, a peace that transcends all understanding and will guard your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. No matter what you face, you can live with the certainty that God is with you, listening to you, and working on your behalf more powerful than any worries. Verse 7, the Lord Himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid or discouraged. These words from Deuteronomy 31:8 are a powerful reminder that no matter what we face, we are not alone. Imagine for a moment that every step you take, every decision you make, and every challenge you face is being guided by God. This verse assures us that He is not only by our side, but also goes before us, paving the way, removing obstacles, and preparing everything so that we can move forward with confidence. The Lord goes before you. That is a promise that changes our perspective. Often, when we face uncertain situations, we feel as though we are walking blindly, as if every step is a leap into the unknown. But here, God tells us, I go first. He is already in the future we fear so much. He has already seen every detail of the path we must travel. When we understand this, anxiety loses strength because we know that we are not walking alone or without direction. He is the perfect guide, the one who knows every curve and every obstacle before we even see them. And He not only goes ahead, He is also with you. This means that He not only prepares the way, He walks with us every step of the journey. In moments of uncertainty, on the hard days, on those nights when it seems no one understands what you are facing, God is there. He is not a distant observer. He is a loving Father who walks with you, who feels your pain, who listens to your worries, and who gives you strength when you feel you can no longer carry on. His presence is a refuge, a source of peace that is available to you at any time. He will never leave you nor forsake you. How often do we fear that in the darkest of times, even God will turn away from us? This verse destroys that lie. It assures us that His faithfulness is unwavering, that no matter how many times we fail, how many doubts we have, or how chaotic our surroundings are, He will never turn away. His commitment to you is not based on your merits or what you do, but on His unconditional love. And that love has no limits, no conditions, and never runs out. Do not fear or be discouraged. These words are both a command and an invitation. God knows that fear and discouragement are two of the most paralyzing emotions we face. Fear makes us doubt, prevents us from moving forward, and makes us believe we are not enough. Discouragement, on the other hand, robs us of hope and makes us think our struggles are meaningless. But here, God tells us, don't let fear or discouragement take over. Because I am with you, I am your strength, your hope, and your guide. The promise in this verse does not remove challenges, but it transforms the way we face them. Knowing that God is ahead of us gives us the confidence to move forward, even when we cannot see the end of the road. Knowing that He is with us brings comfort in moments of loneliness. Knowing that He will never leave us or forsake us provides the assurance that no matter what happens, His presence is constant, His love is faithful, and His power is enough. Think about the struggles you face today. Perhaps you feel like you're walking on uncertain ground, that the difficulties are too great, or that you don't have the strength to continue. This verse is for you a reminder that you don't have to do it alone. God is already in your future, preparing everything for your good. He is by your side, ready to sustain you, and will never, ever leave you. Today, take this promise and make it yours. When fear tries to stop you, remember that God is with you. When discouragement tries to bring you down, remember that His presence will never abandon you. Walk with the confidence that the Lord, the Creator of the universe, goes before you, opening doors, removing barriers, and leading you to what He has prepared for you. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for God Himself is with you now and always. Verse 8. Commend your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act. These words from Psalm 37 verse 5 are a direct call to surrender our burdens, our worries, and our goals to the one who is in absolute control of all things. But what does it truly mean to commend our path to the Lord? It is much more than a simple prayer or symbolic act. It is a deep, conscious decision to surrender every part of our lives to God, fully trusting that He will do what is best, even when we don't understand it. Entrusting our way to the Lord means letting go of control, and let's be honest, that's not easy. We are used to planning, solving problems, and trying to keep everything under control by our own strength. But here, God invites us to do something different, to trust Him, to surrender our worries to Him, and to let Him be the one to guide our steps. It is not about surrendering to passivity, but about surrendering to God's power and sovereignty, knowing that His plan will always be better than ours. Trust Him and He will act. These words are a powerful promise. When we trust God, we are not simply waiting for something to happen, we are putting our faith into action. Trusting does not mean that we will never have doubts or that we will always understand the way, but it does mean we choose to believe in God's faithfulness above our circumstances. It is that faith that activates His power in our lives. He does not just observe, He acts, and when God acts, things change, transform, and often exceed what we could have imagined. Think about the times you've tried to figure something out on your own, only to find more frustration. Maybe you felt that no matter how hard you try, things just don't go as expected. This verse offers a radical alternative: entrust our path to the Lord. By doing so, we stop carrying the weight of wanting to control everything. Instead of worrying about how everything will turn out, we rest in the certainty that God is working on our behalf, even in the details we cannot see. When God says, "Trust me," He does not say it lightly. His invitation to trust is a declaration of His character, His faithfulness, and His power. He knows that life is full of challenges, uncertainties, and moments of weakness. But He also knows that in giving Him our way, we find something the world cannot offer: peace. A peace that does not come from having all the answers, but from knowing that we are in the hands of someone who never fails and who will act. This is the part that changes everything. God not only asks us to trust, He also promises to act in our favor. And when He acts, He does so perfectly. It may not always be in the time or in the way we expect, but it will always be for our good. His way of acting does not always follow our logic, but it always serves His purpose. This promise gives us the freedom to let go of our worries and walk with confidence, knowing that we do not have to do it alone. Entrusting our path to the Lord also teaches us patience. Many times we want things to happen immediately according to our own schedule, but trusting in God means waiting in His perfect time. And although that waiting can be difficult, it is also transformative. It gives us the opportunity to grow in faith, to see His hand at work in our lives, and to experience His power in ways we could never have imagined. Today, stop for a moment and reflect on what path you need to entrust to the Lord. Perhaps it is a decision that weighs on you, a situation you cannot resolve, or a dream that seems unattainable. Whatever it is, God invites you to give it to Him, not so that you give up your efforts, but so that His power and direction can guide your steps. Trust Him, because He never fails. Entrust your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act. These are not just beautiful words. They are an invitation to live freely, with peace, and with the assurance that when we give our lives to God, He not only cares for us, but also transforms the impossible into reality. So today, make that decision. Trust, commend, and hope, because the God who promised to act will do it. Verse 9. Place all anxiety on Him, for He cares for you. These words from 1 Peter 5:7 are a refuge for those who carry the weight of anxiety, uncertainty, and fear. This passage not only invites us to let go of our burdens, but reminds us that we are not alone, that there is a God who cares deeply for us and is willing to sustain us. But what does it really mean to place our anxiety in Him? It is an act of faith, trust, and surrender, releasing our worries and resting in His unconditional care. To place all anxiety on God is much more than simply saying, "I trust in Him." It is an intentional act of releasing the things that weigh us down, those worries that rob us of peace and keep us awake at night. Anxiety is like a heavy load we carry on our shoulders, and many times we try to handle it on our own, convinced we must find the solution ourselves. But here, God tells us, "Leave it in my hands. You don't have to do it alone." It is an invitation to let go of control, to surrender our worries, and to allow His power to work in the midst of our difficulties. The phrase "all anxiety" is key. It does not say some anxieties or just the most important ones, but all. That means there is nothing too small or too big for God. From everyday problems to the deepest struggles, He wants us to give it all to Him. Maybe you think your worries are not important enough to take to God, but this verse makes it clear that He cares about every detail of your life, every thought that distresses you, every fear that paralyzes you, every doubt that consumes you. Everything can be deposited in Him. And here is the most powerful reason for this invitation, because He cares for you. These words are a reminder that we are not left to our circumstances. God is not a distant spectator who simply observes our struggles from afar. He is deeply involved in our lives, caring for us with a love that is unconditional and eternal. He knows every concern you carry in your heart, even those you don't share with anyone. And not only does He know them, but He is also willing to carry them for you. When we place our anxiety on God, we experience a freedom that the world cannot offer. It doesn't mean that problems disappear instantly, but it does mean that we stop carrying the emotional weight of trying to figure it all out on our own. It's like dropping a backpack loaded with rocks and allowing someone else to carry it. That is the peace that comes when we trust that God is in charge, that He is in control, and that His care never fails. But how do we do it? How do we place anxiety in God? It all starts with prayer, talking to him, pouring out our hearts, being honest about our struggles and fears. There is no magic formula or perfect words. What matters is sincerity. Through prayer, say, God, I can't handle this. I give it to you because I know you can. It is an act of humility, of acknowledging our limitations and trusting in his power. Additionally, this verse invites us to live with gratitude. Often, anxiety makes us focus on what we don't have or what could go wrong. But when we remember that God cares for us, our perspective changes. We realize that we are not alone, that every day is a sign of his faithfulness. Gratitude does not eliminate problems, but it shifts our focus from our worries to God's care. But it helps us face them with a different attitude, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. Today, think about what worries you, about the burdens you carry that seem too heavy. God is inviting you to let go of them, to place them in his hands and to trust in his perfect care. It doesn't matter how big or small your struggle is, he is ready to receive it. Place all anxiety in him because he cares for you. These words are a promise, a guarantee that his love and care are enough to sustain you, not just today, but always. So do it, let go of your worries, trust him, and experience the peace that comes from knowing you are in the hands of a God who never abandons you. Verse 10. You will keep in complete peace the one whose mind is stayed on you because he has trusted in you. This verse from Isaiah 26 reveals a powerful secret. True peace does not depend on our circumstances, but on our connection with God. It is a promise that assures us that even in the midst of the strongest storms, we can experience complete peace, a peace that the world cannot give or take away. But how do we reach that state? It all begins with our mind and our trust in him, complete peace. Stop for a moment and reflect on those words. It is not a partial, momentary, or superficial peace. It is a total, deep peace that encompasses every corner of our being. This is the peace that God promises to those who keep their thoughts firmly on him. But what does it mean to persevere in our thinking toward God? It is more than a passing thought. It is a constant and deliberate focus. It is choosing, day in and day out, to focus our minds on his love, his faithfulness, and his promises, rather than letting ourselves be dominated by fear or doubt. The mind is the battlefield where many of our struggles begin. Negative thoughts, worries, and fears often lead us away from the peace God wants to give us. However, this verse reminds us that we can take the effort to persevere in our thinking toward him. It means filling ourselves with his word, recalling his promises, and trusting in his character. It is a daily exercise of faith to redirect our attention from circumstances to the one who has the power to transform them. And here is the key: because in you he has trusted. The peace that God promises is not the result of avoiding trouble or having a perfect life. It is the fruit of trust. When we trust in God, we are saying, no matter what happens, I know that you are in control. This trust does not eliminate challenges, but it changes our perspective. It allows us to face them with a security that does not come from ourselves, but from knowing that God is by our side, working in everything for our good. Think about it. How many times has the lack of peace in your life been the result of trying to control everything? We want to solve it all, anticipate the future, avoid any inconvenience. But this promise invites us to let go of that weight and trust that God has a perfect plan. When we put our trust in him, we stop depending on our own strength and begin to rest in his power. That is the difference between living with anxiety and living with peace. God not only promises peace, he promises to keep us in complete peace. This means that his peace acts as a shield, protecting us and our hearts from attacks of doubt, fear, and despair. But to experience that protection, we must persevere in keeping our focus on him. This does not mean ignoring our problems, but facing them with the certainty that we are not alone, that God is with us, and that his power is greater than any circumstance. Our circumstances give us an eternal perspective, one that reminds us that today's problems are not the end of the story, that God is working even in the darkest of times. This peace is not just for good times, it is for the difficult days, the times of uncertainty, and the challenges that seem impossible. It is in those moments when God's peace shines brightest, because it is a peace that does not depend on what we see, but on who we trust. Today, reflect on where you are putting your mind and your trust. Are you allowing day-to-day worries to dominate your thoughts? Or are you persevering in your focus on God? He invites you to let go of those burdens, to trust in His love, and to experience the peace that only He can give. No matter what you are facing, His promise is clear. If you keep your mind stayed on Him and trust in His plan, He will keep you in complete peace, a peace that does not fail, a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that can transform your life. Verse 11. See that I command you to be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or dismayed, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. This verse from Joshua 1:9 is a powerful call to live with courage and determination. It is not a suggestion, it is a command. God calls us to face life with strength, without allowing fear or discouragement to paralyze us. But the most striking thing is that this command is not based only on our abilities or strength, but on a promise. God will be with us at every step, in every struggle, and at every challenge. When God says, "Strive and be courageous," He is inviting us to take action, not to remain immobile in the face of adversity. It is an invitation to step out of our comfort zone, to face the unknown, and to move forward even when we cannot see the result. But here is the key. The effort and courage that are asked of us do not come only from our own capacity, but from the certainty that God walks with us. He does not ask us to be courageous on our own. He promises us His constant presence as the source of our strength. Fear and discouragement are two of the most common enemies we face. Both have the power to stop us, to make us doubt our abilities, and sometimes even God's faithfulness. But in this verse, He tells us not to be afraid or discouraged. This does not mean that we will never feel fear or that discouragement will never knock on our door, but that we do not allow those emotions to control us. God knows we will face times of uncertainty and challenges that seem impossible. But His promise is greater than any fear. I will be with you wherever you go. Think about how liberating this is. No matter where you go, no matter what you face, God is there. His presence is not limited by time, place, or circumstance. He does not abandon you in your darkest moments, nor does He leave you alone when the challenges seem too great. This promise gives us the assurance that we are never alone, that every step we take is backed by God's power and faithfulness. This verse also reminds us that being courageous does not mean not being afraid. Courage is moving forward despite fear, trusting that God is with us. It is acting even when we do not have all the answers, because we know that His presence is enough. It is deciding to trust in His plan, even if we don't always understand it. When we choose to strive and be courageous, we demonstrate our faith in His ability to guide and sustain us. The phrase, "Do not be afraid or dismayed," is also a reminder that God is not only interested in our actions, but also in our hearts. He doesn't want us to live with a constant burden of fear or the weight of discouragement. He wants us to live with the assurance of His love and His power. He invites us to rest in His promise that no matter what happens, He is by our side. Think about it. How many times has fear or discouragement tried to stop you? Maybe you've felt that you don't have the strength to continue, that the road is too difficult, or that you're not prepared for what's coming. But God tells you, "Be brave. I'm with you." You don't need to have all the answers, nor all the strength. You just need to trust that I will give you what you need in every moment. Today, Take this promise and make it yours. God does not ask you to face life alone. He calls you to walk with courage, knowing that His presence accompanies you. See that I command you to be strong and courageous. These words are not just a command, they are a declaration that you have everything you need in Him. No matter what you face, no matter how great the challenge, remember that the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Move forward in faith, with confidence, and with the assurance that there is no place or situation where His presence is not with you. He is your strength, your guide, and your refuge. Verse 12. We know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. This verse from Romans 8:28 is a statement that completely changes the way we understand our circumstances. It is a powerful truth that assures us that no matter what we face, everything can work for our good if we love God and walk according to His purpose. But how is it possible that all things, even the most difficult ones, work for our benefit? The first thing we must understand is that this verse does not say that all things are good. Some situations are painful, challenging, even devastating. But here is the key. God has the ability to take even the darkest moments and transform them into something that brings good into our life. He is like an artist who takes broken pieces and turns them into a masterpiece. God wastes nothing, neither tears nor pain. To Him, loving God is not just a feeling, it is a daily decision to live for Him, to trust in His plan, and to seek His will in every area of our life. When we love God, we align ourselves with His purpose, and that alignment is what allows Him to use all things for our good. It is a reminder that our love for Him is not in vain, because His faithfulness always responds to our surrender with His transforming power. All things work together for good. Stop for a moment and reflect on this phrase. He does not say some things or only the good things, but all things. This includes moments of joy and moments of sorrow, successes and failures, doors that open and doors that close. God is able to use everything to work in our lives in ways that we may not understand at the time, but that over time reveal His purpose. Even situations that seem meaningless, or those that make us question why they happened, are under His sovereign control. But here is the most important point. This promise is not just about our circumstances, it is about our purpose. God is not only interested in making us feel good, He is interested in transforming us, in molding us to fulfill the purpose for which we were created. Every experience, every trial, and every victory is part of that process. It is like a puzzle piece that on its own may seem confusing or irrelevant, but it fits together perfectly in the full picture that God is building in our lives. Think about the times you faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, the times when you wondered why God allowed certain things. Now, look back and consider how those experiences have transformed you, how they've strengthened you, how they've brought you closer to Him. That's the essence of this promise. God doesn't always deliver us from trials, but He does deliver us. He promises to be with us in the midst of them and to use them for our good. This doesn't mean that we will always understand why we are facing these trials. Sometimes, only with time, will we be able to see how God worked in the midst of our circumstances. But what we can do is trust that His plan is perfect, that His love for us is unwavering, and that His purpose is much greater than what we can imagine. Take this verse and make it yours. No matter what you are facing, no matter how great the challenge or how dark the road seems, remember that if you love God and walk according to His purpose, everything is working for your good. Maybe you don't see it now, but His hand is working behind the scenes, shaping every detail of your life for something extraordinary. So trust, keep going, and keep your faith steadfast, for all things work together for good to those who love God. Verse 13. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. This verse from Psalm 34 reveals a transforming truth. When we seek God with sincerity, he not only listens to us, but he is also at work in our lives. It is a powerful testimony of the psalmist, a statement that invites us to reflect on the impact it has on our lives, to approach God with a genuine heart full of trust and faith. Seeking the Lord is not just a religious act or ritual, it is a movement of the soul, a deep desire to meet the Creator, to open our hearts to him, and to surrender our burdens to him. We often look for answers in the wrong places, trying to fill our emptiness with things that can never satisfy us. But here, the psalmist gives us clear direction. Seeking God is the encounter where our worries find rest, and our fears begin to fade away. And he answered me. These words are a reminder that God is not distant or indifferent to our needs. He hears every prayer, every cry, every whisper that comes from our heart, no matter how broken, weak, or hopeless we may feel. When we seek the Lord, he responds. He may not always do it the way we expect or in the time we want, but his answer always comes. And when it does, it transforms everything. The psalmist also says, he delivered me from all my fears. Notice the word all. It doesn't say that he delivered him from some fears or the greatest fears, but from all of them. This shows us God's unlimited power. He not only has the ability to face our anxieties, but he also desires to do so. Our fears, whether big or small, are important to him because we matter deeply to him. When we seek him, we not only find temporary relief, but complete liberation, a peace that the world cannot offer. Think of the fears that often paralyze us, the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, the fear of losing something or someone, the fear of not being enough. Those fears have the ability to consume us, to steal our joy and our peace. But this verse reminds us that we are not meant to live in bondage to fear. When we seek God, he sets us free. He shows us that his power is greater than anything we face, and that in his presence there is no room for fear. This process of seeking God also transforms us. He invites us to redirect our attention from problems to his power, from focusing on our limitations to focusing on him. Instead of worrying about what we cannot control, we learn to trust the only one who is in absolute control. Seeking God does not mean that our problems will disappear immediately, but it does mean that we will not face them alone. His answer is his presence, and in his presence we find strength, hope, and peace. He encourages us to be persistent. Seeking the Lord is not something we do once and then forget. It is an ongoing practice, a habit that strengthens our relationship with him. Every day we can approach him with our worries, our joys, and our doubts, knowing that he always hears us. In that daily search for his faithfulness, his grace, and his love, we discover new and profound ways he works in our lives. If today you feel fear taking over your life, take this promise as a reminder that you are not alone. God invites you to seek him, to approach him with your worries, and to trust that he will respond. No matter how great the fear or how difficult the situation seems, his power is greater. He not only hears you, but also acts. He is ready to deliver you from all your fears and fill your heart with his peace. So seek the Lord, talk to him, pour out your heart in his presence, and trust in his promise. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. This is not only the psalmist's experience, it can be your experience too. No matter where you are or what you face, his answer is a prayer away, and his power is ready to set you free and transform you. Verse 14, do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and the rivers will not overflow you. This powerful message from Isaiah 43 reminds us that no matter how difficult the circumstances, we are not alone. God not only knows us, but he calls us by name, redeems us, and assures us that we are his. These words are a refuge in the midst of the storms of life, a promise of his presence and his faithfulness. Do not be afraid. How many times have we needed to hear those words? Fear has the ability to paralyze us, to rob us of peace, and to fill us with doubts. But here, God gives us a reason not to fear, for I have redeemed you. This is not just a consolation, it is a declaration of his love and his power to redeem. It means that he has rescued us, that he has redeemed us. He has bought us at an incalculable price. We are not merely a number or a face in the crowd, we are his, deeply loved and valuable. I have called you by name. You are mine. This is one of the most personal statements we can find in Scripture. God does not call us generically. He calls us by name. This means that he knows us intimately, our struggles, our dreams, our weaknesses, and yet he claims us as his own. In a world that often makes us feel forgotten or insignificant, these words remind us that we have a place in God's heart. We are part of his plan, part of his family, and nothing can change that. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Notice he does not say, if you pass through, but when you pass through. The waters represent the difficult moments, the inevitable trials of life. God does not promise us a life free of problems, but he does promise his presence in the midst of them. This changes everything. Knowing that he is with us gives us the strength to face the most difficult circumstances. They may seem overwhelming, but his presence sustains us, guides us, and assures us that we are not facing the storm alone. And if the rivers will not flood you, the rivers can represent those situations that seem beyond our control, moments when we feel as if we are being swept away by the current of life. But God promises that we will not be drowned, that we will not be defeated by those waters. He is our anchor, our refuge, our safety in the midst of uncertainty. Even though the waters are deep and the rivers are abundant, his power is greater. He is able to sustain us, protect us, and carry us through any challenge. This passage also reminds us that our identity is not defined by our circumstances, but by our relationship with God. You are mine. Those words are a reminder that we belong to someone who will never abandon us. No matter how distant we feel or how great the struggle, we are still his. That identity gives us strength, purpose, and hope. It assures us that even in the darkest times, there is a God who sustains us and will never let us fall. Think of the waters and rivers that you are facing today. They may be a personal struggle, a loss, or an uncertainty that seems endless. God says to you, do not be afraid, I am with you. His presence is not only a consolation, it is a guarantee that you will move forward. The waters may try to knock you down, but they will not succeed. The rivers may try to drag you away, but they will not defeat you. Because God, the creator of the universe, is with you, sustaining you and guiding you. Take these words as an anchor for your soul when fear tries to stop you. Remember that God has called you by your name, that he has redeemed you, and that you are his. When the waters seem too deep, trust that he is with you, taking you by the hand. And when the rivers threaten to drown you, remember that his power is greater than any stream. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. This is your promise, your refuge, and your strength in every circumstance. Verse 15. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and humble in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. These words of Jesus in Matthew 11 are a powerful and personal invitation, a promise to those who feel the weight of weariness, the pressure of life, and emotional exhaustion. Jesus not only recognizes our tiredness, but also offers us the solution. to come to him, to surrender our burdens, and to receive a rest that the world cannot provide. Come unto me. This invitation is not for a select few, it is for everyone. Jesus does not set conditions. He does not say that we can only come when we are strong, when we have everything figured out, or when we are perfect. He calls us just as we are tired, burdened, even broken. This call is a declaration of his love and his desire to lighten our burdens, no matter how heavy they are, no matter how far we feel we are from him. He invites us to draw near, and I will give you rest. This is not a superficial promise. It is not a temporary rest or momentary relief. It is a deep rest, a rest for the soul. Jesus does not promise to eliminate all our problems immediately, but he does promise to walk with us through them, removing the burden of facing them alone. It is a rest that transcends circumstances, calms our anxieties, and offers a peace that the world cannot replicate. Take my yoke upon you. Here, Jesus invites us to an exchange. He calls us to leave our burdens and take up his yoke, a yoke that is not heavy or oppressive, but light and manageable. In ancient times, the yoke was a tool that united two animals to work together. Jesus does not ask us to carry the burden alone. He stands by our side, sharing the load, directing us, and holding the yoke. He does not enslave us, he frees us. Because when we walk with him, we find not only strength but also direction and purpose. Learn of me, for I am meek and humble in heart. These words show us the character of Jesus. He is not an authoritarian or distant leader. He is meek, full of compassion, and humble, always willing to walk with us in our struggles. He invites us to learn from his example, to live with humility and meekness, letting go of pride and self-sufficiency, which often lead us to carry more than we can bear. When we learn from him, our lives are transformed because his way of living teaches us to release stress and anxiety, finding rest in his love and grace. You will find rest for your souls. What an incredible promise. Jesus is not only talking about physical rest, but something much deeper. He is talking about the rest that comes when we stop fighting with our own strength, when we stop trying to control everything and simply trust in his care. It is the rest our souls long for, the one that fills us with peace, even in the midst of storms. Think about it. How many times have you felt exhausted, as if the weight of the world is on your shoulders? Perhaps you are carrying worries, responsibilities, or past wounds that seem too heavy to bear. Jesus is saying to you, "Come to me. Let me carry your burdens. Let me give you rest." This is not a call to escape reality, but to face it with his strength, his peace, and his guidance. Today, hear this invitation. No matter how tired you are, no matter how great the burden you carry, Jesus is ready to receive you, to walk with you, and to give you the rest your soul needs. Give him your worries, trust in his yoke, and learn from his way of life. Because in him, you will find a rest that not only soothes the body, but also renews the spirit. He not only wants to take the weight off you, but he wants to give you a life full of peace, purpose, and hope. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That is his promise to you today. Before I finish, I want to invite you to reaffirm your faith by writing in the comments, "I put God first, and I trust fearlessly in his plan." Do it as a statement of trust and hope in your life. See you in the next video, and remember, with God, always forward.